ignored and silenced for many years, which are now heard in this report. Elizabeth Coppin is a survivor of County Home, Industrial School and 3 Magdalen laundries, and she joins me live along with her husband, Peter. Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed for being with us this afternoon. It is a 3,000-page report. I'm sure you haven't had the chance yet to look at it in its entirety, but what does the publication of this report today mean for you?
Right now, I feel relieved, and I wouldn't say happy, relieved that somebody has done something about what I personally and other women have been fighting for the last, in my lifetime, since I left the Magdalen laundries in 1969, for justice and for the lack of respect I was shown, and to gain my human rights. I fled, put it like this, I fled Ireland to the UK, but I fled persecution. That's the only way I describe it. I fled persecution. People may laugh at this in a Western world. How could somebody be fleeing Ireland in 1969 because they felt they were persecuted? I was persecuted. My mum was persecuted. Millions of Irish women and children were persecuted. When I say children, I mean young girls and boys. And those young girls and boys grow up to be very angry, like me, and rightly so, because of the way the state, with support from the church, I don't care what the government is saying about the church were involved as well. Let's be honest and let's not hide behind anything else. But then, having said that, today, Micheál Martin on Taoiseach and Minister Rodrigo Gorman, I've never met them, but I feel for some reason that they are going to get rid of the corruption. To me, that was corruption. The deceit, the control, the misogynistic approach that continued and to a certain point up till today has still continued in Ireland.
Elizabeth, I wonder if you are willing to tell us a little bit about your story. You were born into one of those mother and baby homes.
Yeah, when you say mother and baby homes, I've got to tell you very quickly. Mother and baby homes, yes. County homes owned by the state, the government. They used to be workhouses, but now in 1922, when Ireland got their emancipation, so to speak, I'm still looking for my emancipation, by the way, as an Irish citizen, but when the Irish government got the emancipation for the people of Ireland, they changed the workhouses name to the county homes and brought in pregnant women to look after the feeble, sick and infirmed in there. The mother and baby homes were owned by the Catholic Church. So you've got a conflict straight away of mother and baby homes and county homes. The state owns the county homes. That's why you don't hear much about county homes. Whereas the Catholic Church, they owned the mother and baby homes. That's why we hear a lot about it. Because the government, for generations, all governments, you can't blame one or the other, they were all colluding and conspiring in denial and deceit and cover-up. And today is a great day for me as a woman. I can't say I'm emancipated yet or free from the shackles of the persecution, because it's still there and they're promising you this and that. But I don't know. I mean, they're great two men that I will respect forever for coming forward and expressing how they feel. Because the other government, even up to 2 years ago, before this government came in, they were ignoring us. I went to a Magdalen reunion last 3 years ago, different government in power. With modern technology, we didn't even get hello, goodbye from the Taoiseach then. Not this Taoiseach, the last one. So what is this about? Misogyny? I don't know. I despair with them. But we have to wait and see, because Enda Kenny gave us an apology. It was a good one, I thought. However, they've reneged on one of the promises, which was the Magdalene women would receive a special HAA card, and we still haven't got it.
And we've heard from Micheál Martin today that there will be an official state apology, that they accept all of the recommendations of this report and will put them into action. But of course, you will wait to see, Elizabeth, whether that does come to fruition this time.
We were promised that by the last Taoiseach and the Kenny, the apology was good, but they weren't delivered. And they were supposed to be honouring all the recommendations as well. But you see, it's predominantly the men in Ireland in power. They still don't seem to change, although these two seem to be making an effort.
And Elizabeth, reading your story, you were born into a mother and baby home. You actually got out. Your grandfather paid for you and your mother to get out.
Yeah, he had to pay £100 before he could even take my mum and myself out. They had to pay. If they didn't, they stayed in. That wasn't put in the report, I'd imagine. I don't know. But I know they all had to pay in county homes. I'm speaking for the county homes. I'd imagine it was the same for mother and baby homes. It was a money racket. It was abuse women, sell off children. They used to adopt them out to any Tom, Dick and Harry. They used to give them to the highest bidder in the States. We all know that. And this is the abuse that we've and what we've had to put up with.
But when you were 2, then that all changed. Tell us what happened.
The damage was done from the moment my mum had to go into the county home to have me, because she wasn't allowed to go into what they called respectable hospital for respectable women, married women who were having children. They haven't mentioned that today. So I don't know where all this is coming from. My mum told me, and she only died, rest her soul, 5 years ago. And she actually told me that she was not allowed to enter a hospital in the Listowel in Kerry, where she was from. She had to take herself to the county home in Killarney, because that was the way Irish society was.
For her.
And the hospital refused her anyway. And there's history of other people who've been refused to go into a hospital because they weren't married to have their children. That's a fact. But you see, because we live in rural Ireland, or I'm from rural Ireland, they're too busy concentrating on cities in Ireland, because that's the way the Irish mentality is. They ignore a lot of what happened in rural Ireland, and they're still doing it.
From the age of 2 to 16, I believe it was, Elizabeth, you were in industrial school and Magdalene laundries. You moved around.
Yeah, not to 16. I was put in there, and the education department, the Irish government, were responsible for me. I never went to school, or if I did, I stopped school 6 weeks after my 12th birthday. But prior to that, I was off school for 2 terms the year before. And yet the education department responsible. Anyway, and then they sent me to the Magdalenes. Mm-hmm. I was 14 years and 10 months old when I was taken there by 2 nuns. And it was signed off by the education department. And they were responsible for me. We were wards of the state. And this is how they looked after us. I could never forgive them. Never. The harm, and my kids today see the state I'm in, and my husband. And it's horrendous what we have to go through. Why? Just because our parents had children out of wedlock. I mean, come on. How many, and I've always said, I heard somebody in Ireland say that today, but it's an old saying. I've always said it. Where were the men when I was in the Magdalene laundries? Where were the men? Where were they? Why weren't they in Magdalene laundries? And also, she's probably talking about why weren't the men held responsible in the mother and baby? They wouldn't, because that's how bad the Irish men were. Are they still like that? The proof will be in the result of what they've promised us today. We'll have to wait and see. Although I must be honest, I found them very respectful to us, Roderick O'Gorman and on Taoiseach and Micheál Martin. I've got to hand that to them, but we'll wait and see. I'm not going to commit.
Peter, your husband, sitting alongside you. Peter, you married in 1973, just a few years after Elizabeth had escaped. What impact has this had? What has it been like for you to witness the impact this has had on your wife?
Well, when we first met, I didn't know anything about it. Elizabeth kept it to herself, but gradually she told me more and more. And we've had nightmares she used to have when we first got married. And that was horrific. People coming to get her, to take her away. And that carried on for years and years. Nightmares still come. And it's been horrible for her. It literally has, not just, and it affects everybody. It affects me, and it's affected our children. And I've backed her all the way. Even when she first took them to court, late 90s, and it was thrown out. They didn't believe her. It was thrown out. And then we actually got, from that court case, Elizabeth asked for all her records. She thought she had them all until a little while ago when we had some more records come through, and one of them was from the court case and of the particular nun who was in charge of the industrial place she was in Pembroke Arms. That what she was saying was more lies.
And the solicitors
were lying. They put up names that Elizabeth never even knew. So how, and that affects people, not just Elizabeth, but it affects me. Yeah. And I'll back her 100% all the way. And if the Irish government hasn't sorted it out now, what chance are they going to sort it out in the next year? I can see this going on for longer and longer.
Elizabeth, as you sit and listen to Peter, what strikes me, I wonder what it was for you to become a mother in a loving relationship within a family, knowing what your own mother had been through, having you.
Well, it was like I didn't know anything about life. I really didn't. I was gullible. I didn't have a clue about the facts of life. So I think when you were sent into industrial schools, I'm straining up your question, but I'll go back to it. But when you're sent into a Magdalen laundry from an industrial school where innocence prevailed, I've got to hand it to them there. Innocence did prevail. And you go to England then from Magdalen laundries, and you don't know the facts of life. And then you have boyfriends, and there's one said to me, "Are you a virgin?" And I didn't even know what he meant. And then you go on, and then you meet somebody who is genuine and caring and kind and can be, still compassionate and understand. Yes, of course we have our arguments. That's normal. That's everyday life. But I found it very, very difficult when I had my children. I would have loved to have had a mother, even though I've got a mother, I didn't know her then. I would love to have had a mother support. That I was very isolated. I really believe I had postnatal depression, but it's only lately that it's dawned on me how I felt.
Well, you had no example of what it was to be a mother, Elizabeth.
No, I had no idea what it was like to have a family. When I came over here, I was an ignoramus. I was lost. I had no identity. Even when I got into Wales, we came on a boat. I came on a boat. When I got into Wales, I had to go through customs. And I remember I had put my case on a shelving or something. And he said to me, the chap behind the counter, have you got anything to declare? And you know what I said? I'm lucky I've got myself. Now, I didn't know that my human rights were violated. I didn't know then that it was persecution I was fleeing from. But it was only as England gave me this chance to make something of myself, to do, that I realized and understood it. You see, if I hadn't come here to England, I dread to think how I'd have ended up. And that's just my personal opinion. Lots of other people in Ireland, they made it great after that, but I wouldn't have. I know that. And it was that stigma and the nastiness you had to live with. It was a terrible sin to be in an industrial school even. It was a terrible crime and sin to be, it was worse to be in a Magdalen laundry. But yeah, we were all young girls that were sent from industrial schools to the Magdalen laundries. And I'm wondering now if we were the ones that were actually vaccinated as children, that we were picked out for the vaccination trials and sent to the Magdalen laundries in the hope that we would rot there. Because a lot of the women have died there. I saw them die there.
And of course, those shocking figures about the number of children that died, 9,000 children. You talked about not knowing what it was to be part of a family, to have a mother. You did reconnect with your birth family eventually.
I did. And I was glad. It was the best thing that happened to me. I got about 5 or 10 years getting to know her. And then when she died, obviously, my business was closed in Ireland and my children were here and I came back then.
But that gave you the opportunity to ask your mother so many questions you must have had.
Yeah, and the life she had from them, it was unbearable. And the way they treated women, it was just unbearable. It was.
When you were taken away, what happened to your mum, Elizabeth?
Well, my grandfather had to pay £100 for me and my mum to come out of the county homes. Otherwise, she'd have had to stay there. And she thinks it was around Christmas time because when my grandfather brought her home, there was all lights up and a roaring fire. She remembers that, and he bought her a coat and a pair of shoes for her, and he'd made up a bed for me, a cot. It was out of cupboards or something, a drawer or something he had, and it was all kind of mattressified, and he'd all set up anyway with the fire roaring. And then sadly, life was bad for my mum when she remarried, and I was taken away. But again, they left a perpetrator there and they took the child away.
Elizabeth and Peter, thank you both very much indeed for talking to us so bravely this afternoon after the publication of that report. Elizabeth Coppin and her husband Peter there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's bring in our Ireland correspondent, Stephen Murphy, who joins me now. One of the elements that came out of this report was the silencing of the voices like Elizabeth's for so many years. Are they now finally being heard, Stephen?
Well, certainly some of the testimony you heard, and I mean, so many of these survivors are coming forward now since this report has been published a bit earlier this afternoon. One example you heard just there. I think certainly many of the thousands, the 57,000 families affected by this are certainly feeling freer now to voice their opinions. But it is a very substantial report, 3,000 pages long. It's complex. At times the language can be dense. So I think the survivors and the survivor groups want a little bit more time on a broader sense to try and digest the findings of this. We've just stepped out of a press conference here at Government Buildings in Dublin, conducted by the Irish Taoiseach, the Prime Minister here, Micheál Martin. He described this report as having exposed a very dark, difficult and shameful period of very recent Irish history. He spoke of the deeply rooted misogyny that existed in Irish society during the time covered by this report as well. I asked him about one particular line, which I know several survivors have taken issue with. There's one line in this report which said that there was no evidence that these women were forced into these homes by the church or by the state, and said it sought to place most of the blame, it appears, instead on the fathers of these children and the women's immediate families. And I asked the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister, did that in a sense look to gloss over the role played by the church or the state? He didn't feel that it did. He said there was a shared responsibility here. He said there was a very oppressive culture at that time, which left these women feeling they had no alternative. There was nowhere else for them to go except to go into one of these homes, which the reports have provided a refuge, albeit a harsh refuge. I know many survivors will take issue with that and disagree with that. We spoke to several for Sky News, and we'll air their stories later, who spoke of how in their family history a parish priest may have called to the home of the family in the 1940s or the 1950s in rural Ireland and told the family in no uncertain terms that the daughter of the family who had fallen pregnant, wasn't married, was causing a scandal within the parish and simply had to leave. There was one survivor who told us how his mother, at 7 months pregnant, was placed on the crossbar of a bicycle and cycled 10 to 12 miles up and down hills and dropped off at a home where subsequently she gave birth and that child was taken away from her. Now, when you consider stories like that from many survivors, they will take issue that this report seems to find no evidence that these women were forced into these homes by church or state, and said, the Taoiseach said that the church was instead part of the broader societal pressure on these women, which left them feeling they have had no other option but to enter these homes. So there's lots to digest here. There's lots of issues. But as Micheál Martin said, it is no doubt that this is a reflection of a very dark and deeply misogynistic time in very recent Irish history. This covers right up until 1998. So it's not ancient history. It is modern, mid-20th century Irish history. And we'll now look forward to tomorrow when the Taoiseach will stand up in the Dáil, the Irish Parliament. It returns tomorrow, and he will make an historic and formal state apology to all of those affected. It has been decades in the making, and for many of these women in particular, I think it will have come decades too late.
Stephen Murphy, thank you. Police are to take